Yay Networks.
I've gone back and forth a lot whether to share my story in here in this Raw Truth series. And clearly, because you are listening to this now, I've decided to. And I want to be very clear that this is just a few elements of my story, of my personal journey, but I chose to share some of the more pivotal experiences that really have shaped who I am today. I'm Molly Kimball. Welcome to Fueled, a wellness and nutrition podcast. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition journalist with a passion to help people live their strongest, healthiest life possible. In my weekly TV segments and columns, there's a limited amount of time and space to cover everything, but there's so much more to share. This podcast is my opportunity to dive deeper into the topics you want to know about. This week's episode of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition is one of our sub-series called The Raw Truth. And The Raw Truth is a series of interviews with different people that you're going to be hearing over the coming months. And it was inspired by the idea of this Raw Truth interview series was inspired by my conversation with Phil Degree. I did a podcast with him. If you dial back in your podcast library, you'll see it, where he shares about his cancer journey. He shares what's really under there, the challenges that he's been through, his cancer diagnosis, how these challenges have shaped him, how they've changed him, how they've driven him to be an even better version of himself. So after that conversation with Phil, it's one of those where, knowing Phil and knowing his humor and then hearing this darkness in it and hearing where he took this darkness and what he learned from it. And he basically catapulted himself into this whole other level of living mindfully, living this very wellness-focused, wellness-centered life. I decided to make this Raw Truth episode a regular thing every month, every 2 months or so, featuring people and their stories of inspiration, their grit, their tenacity, their ability to get through to the other side, a stronger version of themselves, with the benefit now of their experiences bringing a more global view to their life, to their world. I've gone back and forth a lot whether to share my story in here in this Raw Truth series. And clearly, because you are listening to this now, I've decided to. And I want to be very clear that this is just a few elements of my story, of my personal journey, but I chose to share some of the more pivotal experiences that really have shaped who I am today. And I am joined by my friend and colleague, Maria Sylvester Terry, to help me share these stories with you. So we'll be sharing my experiences, how I dealt with different events, different challenges, different hurdles along the way. I also want to be very clear, this isn't advice. If you've listened to this podcast before, if you know me, you know that I don't love the shoulds. I'm air quoting the shoulds. This is not about what we should do in certain situations. This isn't advice. This isn't to say that this is the better way. We also, I understand that there is a lot going on in the world. There is a lot of trauma, crises, life-altering, life-threatening events that unfortunately happen daily around us and across the world. And I realize that my experiences that I'll be sharing, my hurdles, these are minuscule, truly minuscule in the big picture of life, of humanity. As you're going to hear, some of these challenges, actually for many of these challenges, almost all of them that I'll be talking about, the impetus for change on my end was that I did not want these issues, these things to define me, to define who I am as a person. And I realized that this is not always possible. We don't always have a choice. Depending on the experience or our level of social support or our own personal readiness to change, this may not be possible, or it may not feel possible. It just may not be where you are right now. And that is okay. It is beyond okay. There's no judgment at all. There's no judgment in how we process our own experiences. We each have our own journey, much of which, as much as we want to think it's in our control, it's largely out of our control. But I'm hoping that by listening to this snapshot of these components, these pieces of my story, this handful of experiences, that you might find some level of inspiration. We can start to move towards some element of conscious change in our reactions, our behaviors, and the messages that we tell ourselves. So maybe it's simply arriving at a place of peace as best we can with the hand that we've been dealt. So all of this is to say, this sub-series, this Raw Truth sub-series within our Fueled Wellness podcast is all about learning from others' experiences, finding elements in their experiences that can inspire us and help us to understand ourselves perhaps even a little bit better. So Maria, this is something that you and I talk about often, and it's sort of what the reality is, and then also, but what people perceive. And a lot of times those two things are very, very different. And that's really what this series, The Raw Truth, is about, is, uncovering and kind of digging into what some of these things are.
I think that helps us all realize that there's something inside of all of us. Maybe you think somebody else has it all together, but in reality, we're all just getting through this life in whatever unique way that we can.
That's sort of what the series is about, is taking things what they are at face value and then kind of peeling back these layers.
And sometimes those layers get a little stinky.
A little sticky and stinky, yeah. Right? So where do you want to start?
I'm really curious, how do you deal with that statement? I hate to use the word deal, but you probably get this comment a lot, which is like, wow, you have it all together. How do you have it together all the time? Well, Molly's just got the perfect life. And I know that you don't, but I know you. What do you think of that statement when someone says Molly's got it all together? She's built this incredible organization. She's on TV every week. Do you have it all together? Tell us a little bit about that.
I think when I look at kind of the, either the, she's lucky or she's fortunate or she has the perfect life, I am really fortunate, and luck has some to do with it, but luck has a lot to do with it, just how we were born and where we arrived in our life. I mean, a lot of that is, everyone has different philosophies on things, but to some degree, there's just a heck of a lot of luck there. There's also what we do and what we choose along the way that positions us to do what we do. And there's certain risks that often at the time that we take them, we didn't even realize they were risk. And we're just making a decision, and we don't realize maybe that was a giant step or a giant leap that led us in a totally different way. But I do think, like, if someone says, and I don't really hear people say that there's a perfect life. And I think that I hope that people realize that nobody has that. I try to realize, like, when I look at someone, I may admire certain characteristics of them. I may think, wow, they have a really glamorous life. They do very glamorous things. And that might be the fact. They do glamorous things because they're showing it on Instagram, but they may not have a fully glamorous life, and they may have what's far from a perfect life. So I try to separate that in my mind to understand that too, that maybe what I see is one way, what's really under there, And so, yeah, I think that there's, I think though that largely when I'm faced with something that's not good, whether it's just really terrible, really crappy, devastating, and we'll talk about some of those things today, or stuff that's just a mild irritant, I think that for the most part, I look at it two ways. Is this something I can do something about or not? And if I can, I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to do everything possible to try to, whatever it is, put that effort if it's going to have some impact. And if it does, and if I can't, then I do my best to step away from it and not let it weigh me down.
Beautiful. I think you put in such beautiful words this idea of other people may do glamorous things, but they might not have a truly glamorous life, and they might not have always been able to do those glamorous things. I think that you can say that so clearly, so confidently, because you are very in touch with where you're from and your family and what makes you Molly from the very beginning. And it would be hard to disconnect that. I'm going to put my head down and I'm going to do it from your dad. So I think we could start there. If that makes you comfortable, I think we all would love to know a little bit about little Molly and where she came from.
I all of a sudden felt tears come in my eyes because you've also now met my dad.
Yes.
And so, and he's just warm. He's loving. He's very emotionally expressive, and he, interestingly, I'm trying to get him to do this podcast, The Raw Truth.
Great.
So anybody who knows my dad, if you're listening, be like, hey, Mr. Fred, encourage him to do it. I think he talked to me about it for an hour of what he would share.
Oh.
We were out for a walk. He was riding his bike, but he, I think, has a little bit, of apprehension. But he wasn't born the way of being emotionally forward as he is, and he had to work on that. And so, but of course, from as long as I've known him, he's been that way. So growing up, he was the primary parent. So from the time I was 3 on, my mom was still in the picture, but my mom had remarried. She had moved away. She was in a different city. And as a young girl, I chose to stay with my dad. And that was I'm 46. So at 3 years old, for the father to be the primary parent 43 years ago, I mean, that was just very unusual, And he did he did the best he could do. And there was lots of bumps along the way, but he kind of filled that role in ways that was, the father, but also in a lot of ways it was that maternal figure and that emotional availability. And there was always talks about how we're feeling or how things made him feel or me feel or whatever it might be. And if there was things that, like when you're going through puberty and things that would just make other dads just so uncomfortable, he would face it head on and I would be mortified, but, or he would have, my friend Amy, my best friend Amy's mom, he would have her go with us like bra shopping or something like that. And I remember during that phase, I remember hearing him on the phone with Amy's mom like multiple times. And I had to go look up the word traumatic because he kept saying, this is just so traumatic.
For him or for you?
For him. Because here he is, this dad wanting to be supportive in all these ways, but I obviously had no idea what's going on here. So he, though, and my mom was always in the picture, but just from afar. And so, and they actually had a really supportive friendship after they split. And in fact, as my mom remarried later, my dad was the photographer in her wedding. When my dad remarried, my mom took the pictures there. So they were always very supportive and complimentary of each other to me. And so I always felt I didn't feel pulled, and it was something that I think they were both comfortable with what this arrangement was. And they both felt that it was also best, my mom included, which made that
beautiful.
Easier. Let's take a minute to talk about Seed, one of our sponsors for this week's episode. So we know that our health goes far beyond our workouts, and so much of it nutritionally begins in our gut. Our health goes far beyond our workouts, of course, and nutritionally, so much of it begins in our gut. Adding a daily probiotic and prebiotic can be game-changing, but know that not all probiotics are equal. So enter Seed. I love that Seed implements whole genome testing and sequencing to genetically validate each strain and species. And Seed also uses a clinically tested delivery technology to protect their probiotics to keep them safe and viable on that long journey through our digestive tract. Seed's Daily Symbiotic is a broad-spectrum 2-in-1 probiotic plus prebiotic with whole-body systemic benefits that extend far beyond our gut, including skin health, heart health, and gut immune function. Start your new healthy habit today. Visit seed.com/fueled and use promo code FUELED for 20% off your first month of Seed's Daily Symbiotic. That's seed.com/fueled, promo code FUELED.
You used the word scrappiness previously when you started, and you've told me so many hilarious stories. You've painted these pictures of you and your dad being scrappy, and then you've also told some really beautiful stories that are really poignant about your dad showing this scrappiness, and we can talk about those later. But can you paint some of those images for us before we move on into like your later life and things that you experience? I think everybody deserves to hear, what was it like being a Kimball?
Yeah, so growing up, we had very little money. And in fact, like right around the time I was, in my mid-teens, the house went into foreclosure, like he filed bankruptcy. It was that kind of a thing, which wasn't uncommon for a lot of people at that time in the 80s. I mean, he was certainly one of many that this was happening to. But through, number one, there wasn't a large amount of disposable income. And number two, there was primarily a male influence in the household. So we had the bright orange Formica countertops and stuff, the stuff that like you would see, put the Brady Bunch house 20 years later, 25 years later. By this point, most of the moms and families had said, like, made the decision, we need to renovate, we need to update, at least change the carpet, change the curtains. We didn't. So it was, our house was like a step back, and we had this, bright shag carpet and the curtains, all this stuff. And we had a couple of cats, and we were, just big cat people. And then like the couple of them they had babies at the same time. And then like all of a sudden we had 3, then we had like 17 cats and they were indoor, outdoor cats. And like, we knew them all. My dad and I would go for walks, and there was a couple of them that would come for walks with us. So they were like,
it's a super trooper
trail behind us. They're like, what cat goes for a walk with you? But like they did, So, but yeah, the house, our curtains had just cat clawed marks through, everything. But between money and him just having, he was just trying to keep it all together. He was in the restaurant business for years, and then he went into real estate. So he was just trying to keep that together, raise this daughter. Getting new curtains or sofa was like last on his list of priorities. So I'm like, as I'm getting older and you start to care a little bit more about appearances, I'm like, can't we at least get some throw pillows? So I would have these like accessories that were like fashionable for that time period, put on top of this like baseline of like really ancient stuff. So we were trying. And he met and married my stepmom, Pat, who's just amazing. And she's just like, their relationship for me is a model of what a relationship, I don't love the word should, but this is what a relationship should be. And so when he met Pat, I was 15. They actually got married just 6 months after they met. And that was also shortly after he filed bankruptcy, everything. And Pat says, I must have really loved him then. So then being able to have a female influence. And again, my mom was involved, just not in that way of, when it would be clothes shopping and money's tight. But my dad didn't know about all the ways to discount shop and stuff like that. So it was great when Pat came into the picture, because she could show you how to make, $200 for a school year budget of clothes, which really isn't much for the whole year. If you're going to spend at a place like Dillard's, you get 2 shirts, 2 pants. And when you wear the same shirt and pants over and over to school, you get notes in your locker.
And you have 17 cats.
And you have 17 cats. You're getting notes in your locker telling you that like maybe you're weird and you don't know how to dress, which is also devastating at that age. So that was a big, that was sort of, that paints the picture,
It does. And I think we all want to know, like we all want that figure or parental duo of, this is what love can look like. This is what companionship can look like. And how your dad met Pat really shows his love and dedication to you, which is so beautiful and is really another instance of just how scrappy he was and how that inspired you to live this full life from very little. Can you tell us how they came to be?
Right. So I mentioned that, we didn't have an income that would be, we weren't in a financial situation to be able to pay for private school or anything like that. So my dad was really hoping that I would get into one of the magnet schools, and he had gone to Baton Rouge High, which became a magnet school. And so he was hoping that I would get into Baton Rouge High, but there was a wait list. And so the summer before freshman year, he kept checking to see what number was I on the wait list. And he would call or go to the school every day to see. And literally every day. And Pat was the secretary at Baton Rouge High. And so she was the one dealing with this possible nuisance who was there all the time. They also both went to the same church. And so he recognized her from church, sees her here every day. Then that's how they met and started dating, was from him pestering her to see. And then I did get bumped up the wait list. I did go to Baton Rouge High and went there all 4 years. So yeah, I don't think it had anything to do with his persistence, but he at least was in the know of where I was on the list. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that, to me, that just shows that Pat must have known how much your dad was in your corner.
Yeah.
And really prioritized you. And, maybe the curtains were tattered, but you had so much opportunity because of the life he carved out and chose to carve out, which is incredible. So you go to Baton Rouge High,
Yes.
and then you're there for 4 years, and then what happens after that? Where do you go? What do you do?
Yes. So I would say kind of the transition things that I look at of, okay, the defining time is growing up that way. We talked a bit about Pat and their relationship. One of the things that I saw of how they manage conflict for me was just very like, it was just like, it was life changing to see this, because a lot of times if you're growing up, and especially if you don't have two parents that are like, happily married, or you just see, and the way that you see things play out, whether it's on TV or whatever, a lot of times an argument is a fight. And so with Dad and Pat, though, they were very open. They actually, we had a family counselor that my dad and I went to for years, just the two of us. We all went, Dad, Pat, and I, as they started dating. And so Dad was very like, let's do this with guidance of like how to merge these families, because Dad has me. He has a son and daughter, Kenny and Christy, from his first marriage. And then Pat had two sons. So it was this whole blend of a family to bring together. So they did this with guidance, and they reached out and said, we don't know everything. We want to get the help that we can get. But what I would see is when there were disagreements, they were very quick to address it, talk about it. Things were not tucked under the rug. Things were wide open. But then they would also be really quick to laugh about things and very quick to let go of things. There was no harboring or coming back to, weeks later, you did this. I mean, it was in the moment, and then it would be gone. And it was not, that throwback to past arguments and stuff. And I remember like hearing them in the other room, and they would just be dying laughing. And then still now, I mean, like, they've been married now for a really long time. Pat's almost 80, Dad's 81. And I mean, they just giggle, they cry themselves laughing. And so that as a model to see was just it's been incredibly influential in my own relationships.
Yeah, what a beautiful dichotomy of scrappiness and strength and fortitude, and you push through boundaries and you make this life work for you. And also, it doesn't work out, you can laugh about it.
Right.
And I've never once felt as, someone who works in your organization that you were a grudge holding person. I feel like we laugh so much that it makes work so enjoyable. And so you bring that to people that are outside of your family too. And that's so incredible for other people to be able to experience. So something that you learn at such a young age, 15, you could have had your head in the clouds and you were able to acknowledge what was happening, whether you realized it or not. Now you can look back and say, wow, like, I really learned so much, and we'll get to talk about Brad at some point, but like, I'm sure that helped inspire the kind of relationship you wanted. So the bar was different. And for a lot of young people, the bar is in other places, and you don't really have the paradigm of what a relationship is. And it's just beautiful. And also kudos to your dad. Can I just paint a picture for anyone who's not in Louisiana? Like, I'm from the Northeast. And people went to therapy, but there was definitely a stigma around it. But for your dad in a southern state, being like, no, we're going to talk about our feelings.
Did we talk?
Yeah,
Right.
That's just, I mean, what a step that's so uncomfortable to do that and to put your family in a position where like, we're going to talk about things that are uncomfortable. But that is such a springboard into life. What a gift. And then the fact that the three of you had a counselor together really allows for a beautiful family arrangement, I think.
And I think those are takeaways that we can do at any point in our lives. So we're talking about this at that point. But for listeners, if there's anything that you're going through that's this transition or maybe a merging of different things, and it might not be merging of relationships, it might be things that are professional or other things that you're going through, other transitions, like not being afraid to ask for that outside help. But yeah, it definitely shaped who I am and who I've become. It was something that through those years I talked about, we didn't, finances were an issue. So I knew that if I was going to go to college, I had to have a scholarship. I had to have not just a scholarship to pay for school, but grants. How am I going to cover room and board or books? But I knew that I needed to really focus on grades and taking that next step for it to apply for scholarships and work with a counselor and this. And so through that, there was just kind of like that head down focus. And I was able to get the scholarships, the grants that helped to cover that room and board and books and some of those different expenses. But through that also comes, there's a drive that's there that can be really productive. And I guess that drive is why we're doing what we do with Eat Fit. And it's the different things that have produced these really fun projects that are also so rewarding. But that drive can also be, you've got to make sure you're keeping it in check, because if it's left unchecked, it can just go like it can be all consuming.
Sure. It can totally be all consuming. And sometimes what consumes you are really frustrating and ugly thoughts and negative thoughts that sometimes they're not even yours, right? So you're a kid, you're a teenager getting ready to go to college. What are some of those things that you might have heard that would have driven that really thoughtful and prepared mind to a place that was all consuming?
The compulsion. But those high school years, those teenage years, were so influenced, so easily influenced. And I think that's also just something that's really important for our listeners to hear, that sometimes we don't know how that one comment can trigger a really positive effect or a negative. And Pat, I keep talking about Pat, my stepmom, hers, of course, was not one comment, but she was one influence. And that influence had a huge trickle effect in a really positive way in their relationship. So it was very insidious. It was, you didn't even feel it coming. You didn't see it coming. And from essentially the time that I graduated high school, the summer before my college year, by the end of my freshman year, I had dropped over 40 pounds. And I didn't have 40 pounds to lose. There was a heavy emphasis on weight, on thinness, on how many people tell kids when they're going to college, watch out for the freshman 15. How many people say that? And then like they pat you on the stomach or whatever, or watch out. A few of those comments, and I panicked. Oh my gosh, what if this happens to me? And so I kind of just started tightening things up a little bit, maybe started, exercising a little more, running a little extra, eating a little bit less. But it became this real slippery thing. And I think because between working, focusing on school, and really trying to, in, I guess like the counseling world, the therapy world, as a kid, you would be described as like a perfectionist or type A, or these overachievers, or the different things that would be kind of applied there. But I would say that, yeah, all those things did apply. And so it sort of was this perfect storm that's not surprising that did happen through someone's eyes. And at this point, it had been maybe, 20, 25 pound loss, but in one semester on someone who didn't really need to lose that. And then for it to continue. And so that was one where, what do you do at this point? And for him, my dad was like, he was on this fence. Like, I want to do the right thing, but I don't want to perpetuate this and make it worse. And so ultimately what we did, it didn't go into any place. And this is actually something that I don't share, and I haven't ever shared on this podcast. It's not something that I share like just out there, but it's not something that I hide either. I've shared it with many clients over the years, with many friends who it's relevant to them, but it's not something that, I think it's not something that I have let define me. So ultimately, I was able to work with a therapist, a different therapist than our family counselor. And I went to a few that like specialized in eating disorders. And, the first one said, my goal is to have you eat a cheeseburger with mayonnaise and fries. And I'm like, I don't love ground meat really anyway. And I was like, I remember being like horrified. And there was other, just her personality, it just didn't click. And a few others didn't click. So kind of back to the stories about my dad, like we ended up like at one point we're in the offices of a person who's like in the, a leadership role with our insurance company. And he's like, we've got to get Molly into a counselor who she's going to connect with. And I remember like, I'm crying, my dad's crying, Pat's there with us. And I remember this guy behind a desk. I don't even know what his role was. And I'm sure that most people are not sitting in his office. And he said, well, what would you like, describe to me what you would like in a counselor. And I said, somebody like Pat. And Pat starts crying, you know. So then he says, I think I know the person for you. So he connects me with a woman actually in Baton Rouge. Her name's Renee Dole. And she was a game changer for me. And so in working with her and really kind of like uncovering like what was going on and what was driving this, I was able to pull myself out of it. And so, you know, almost as quickly as it happened over that next year, I was able to pull myself out of it. And there was still the residuals. There's still a lot of lingering that I worked through over the next years. But I felt like I was really happy that I had not let it get to such a place that it was going to define what my life was going to be. And that was really important to me at that time. Like this, and I had a doctor who I went to see, and it was just a normal checkup. And she said, you have so much that you want to do. And she was obviously seeing, you know, the markers and the weight markers in this. And she said, you have so much that you want to do. And if you continue down this path, you're not going to be able to accomplish any of those things. And I was like, wow, she's right.
Yeah, there's such an important thing to note about disordered eating or habits related to food and anyone experiencing eating disorders is that recovery is a choice. And it has to come from within. It has to come from you. And it couldn't come from your dad. It couldn't come from Pat. It couldn't come from Renee. It had to come from you. And there is that scrappiness again. That's sort of like, no, I have to live this life. I have to be fully a part of the life that I'm in. I'm in school. I'm young. Like that confrontation, it's not, no one's a weak person for not choosing, right? Like sometimes it takes other people much longer to heal. And I just think it speaks to who you are, that you were able to choose that and to say, you know what, this isn't going to be me. This isn't going to be my identity, because it could have been. And how different you would be as a dietitian, how different you would be as a wife, as a friend, had you not. I mean, you put yourself first, and that allowed you to then help so many other people.
It's why I went into this career too. Yeah.
Yeah. You kind of took the words right out of my mouth. Like it had to have been, right? So
I didn't even know that being a dietitian was a job. And then Renee said, I think you should meet with a dietitian. I'm like, tell me about this dietitian. And then Dean, yeah. And I actually now know that dietitian in another whole way.
Wow.
Yeah. That she's kind of come back to her life. I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, and yes, once I learned this, I was like, wow, I was fascinated by how she guided me in a very gentle way, nudged me out of my comfort zone, educated me, guided me, and did it within parameters that I felt comfortable enough with to have that forward movement and not have this big regression. And so, yeah, it was something it was definitely a defining time, but again, it wasn't something that I wanted it to be part of my story, you know? And I was like, okay, I sunk into that. I was able to pull myself from that. Let me move forward. And with these tools, how much can I do to like support other people who are going through this or similar?
Yeah. The only word coming to my mind right now is team. You worked with a team. You acknowledged that you had the desire to make these choices and desire to move on and move forward. And you listened to the people on your team, from dad to your dietitian. And that, I mean, I'm on your team now, which is awesome. So I see this, you know, grittiness and this, you know, it is a raw truth about you that like, you're not your average only child raised by a single parent. You really made a different theme out of that story, that everyone's story is different. And I'm also so inspired by, you know, where you were at 18, 19 to be in this place on your own. And yet you knew you weren't on your own. You accepted help, which is a hard lesson to learn I did not accept help when I was 20. I refused help. So that's beautiful. And I wonder about, you know, how did school end for you? What happens? You decide to become a dietitian. So you go to school. Tell us a little bit about
so
that.
I switched majors. I was like,
What was your first major?
My first major was microbiology with the intent to go with kind of a pre-med emphasis to go to medical school. And I remember I was like looking around in the classroom and I was like, I thought this was my drive. I thought this was my passion, but wow, this nutrition thing, like, and this can be a career, because to me that was so enjoyable and fascinating to learn, and like how our bodies respond and perform. I was like, this is like, there was nothing else I wanted to do. I was like, this is incredible. So I switched my major, and this is really, I thought I might tear up when we're talking about this, because this is the first time, this is like semi-publicly, I wouldn't say this is public, but I don't really talk about it and uncover this. There's probably a lot of people who are pretty close to me who are like, wait, I didn't know that. There's a lot who are close to me who are like, yeah, like there's like a lot in there, but this is something that, and again, I've thought about it, and it's not like it's for a reason that I'm not saying it. It just isn't. There's so much else that I have that I want to say, but I do think that this is an important thing to share, because it can seem like, oh, well, she's always been that way, or this is her, whatever. Like, but there was a lot of evolution to get to a point where you're comfortable with how you feel in your skin and what you're putting into your body.
Yeah, and how many dietitians also experience that.
Right.
So
right.
For those of you who are listening that aren't as familiar with the dietetics field, there is a large number of women in the field. It's mostly women, like 95%, I think. And so you think about how we grow up and what we see and what surrounds us and the messaging we receive. There's no doubt that there's going to be a higher interest in nutrition for folks that are really struggling with food and the relationship with food. And the fact that it became a tool for you to heal instead of a tool for you to continue to drive. That is a huge concern I have about our field sometimes. And it's, I think, just so important to note that that transition into nutrition allowed you to, kind of see yourself in a new light. Like you can help, you can be a part of a solution.
It's something that I had such a passion for anyway. And then to take what had become this obsessiveness, I think, of course, this was way before the days of Instagram, but you think now there's so many things on social, and I think especially with Instagram, that can be really damaging for kids to see, to read, and not just kids, people, adults, that can really put these thoughts and a lot of self-doubt about our appearance and our bodies and our size. I don't even know how I would have handled that at that age, because those things weren't there. The influences that I had at that point were largely things like magazines and real people, like who I knew, that you were maybe having this comparison or whatever that might be, or getting misinformation or kind of these other incorrect cues from. So you had to take something that was such a passion, but had gone into a negative side of an obsession in an unhealthy way, and to be able to reverse that and to really look at it from a science base and look at it again, performance and how our bodies respond and how we can fuel. And like, this to me was amazing. Let's take a minute to talk about Headspace, one of our sponsors for this week's episode. So you may have tried meditation before and just felt like it didn't go so well, or maybe you thought you were doing it all wrong. But if enhancing your mental being is part of your self-care plan this year, then you're going to want to check out Headspace. Headspace is your daily dose of mindfulness in the form of guided meditations in an easy-to-use app. It's one of the only meditation apps advancing the field of mindfulness and meditation through clinically validated research. I love that Headspace is so customizable for just whatever we're dealing with right now, whatever the situation. Headspace really can help us feel better. If we're feeling overwhelmed, Headspace has a 3-minute SOS meditation for you. If you need help falling asleep, there's wind down sessions. And for parents, Headspace even has morning meditations that you can do with your kids. Headspace's approach to mindfulness can help to reduce our stress, improve sleep, boost our focus, and really just increase our overall sense of well-being on our schedule, anytime, anywhere. We all deserve to feel as happy as possible, and Headspace is meditation made simple. Go to headspace.com/fueled. That's headspace.com/fueled for a free 1-month trial with access to Headspace's full library of meditations for every situation. This is the best deal offered right now. Go to headspace.com/fueled today. So I moved to New Orleans started my dietetic internship. As we got towards the end and I was like looking for jobs, I applied there's a job posting for a dietitian at our fitness center, which was then called Elmwood Fitness Center. It's Oshner Fitness Center now. And, I explored what it was about, and it was basically, we want to create a nutrition program here at the fitness center. And this was in 99, and there was not really many fitness center based or gym based dietitians, certainly not in a full-time role at that point. And so I really had nothing to lose, because I didn't have a job that I was stepping away from. I was finishing my internship. So for me, I could take that gamble. I could take that risk for something that would be otherwise considered leaving a safe bet of a job to do this startup thing. So I took the gamble, I took the risk. And I remember when I was interviewing for the job, there was, several people there who were interviewing me. And one of them was Ken Kostick. He was the guy, he had kind of designed the club, and he was sort of like a blend of like I used to say like a Ross Perot, he reminded me a little of, and merged with Walt Disney, so you put those two together. And I remember he was like, I want to have a team of dietitians, and I want to have one day you've got this team of dietitians working with you. And I remember thinking, this man is out of his mind, because if I can build a practice and build enough just to warrant my job here, because there's nothing there. There was no foundation. And so I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be happy just to have enough to keep myself here and justify this. So I was offered the job. I accepted the job. And so I finished my internship on a Friday, and I started that job on a Monday. And it felt incredibly overwhelming. It was an intimidating and daunting to create a program there from scratch. But I'm so glad I took that leap.
I think about, though, like, not to like pull you back into the depths, but you're telling me you're 24 years old-ish. You have a job where you are building a nutrition program. You are a put my head down and do my work, focus, sometimes in a not great way, right? Like in a way that pulls you from the world and into the depths of yourself. How did you manage that? That sounds like a big choice, right? Like you chose to take this job, and what was that like?
I saw clients anytime they would want to see me. If they wanted to come at 6 a.m. or 8 p.m. at night or on a Saturday, yes. Whenever they would want, because I just needed to really like build this base of clients. And so over the years, like just that perseverance and the consistency and working to just, have that ownership and growth, it was a lot. And then from that was the offshoots where writing came from that, because writing was a way to say, well, I don't have a marketing budget. At the time we didn't, but I could write for local publications and have that exposure and that familiarity and contact information in these publications. And that's how, the writing is also what led to the WGNO TV segments. And then, now we have the podcast. So there's these kind of different outlets that have extended from, okay, how can we creatively let people know that these things even exist, So, but yeah, for the first probably at least the first 5 years, it was just really like, again, head down. I really want to make this work. So I got certified to teach spin classes. I took inventory of all the supplements and managed all of our supplements. I did stuff that was like, I taught the kids workout classes, whatever needed to be done until my schedule filled with clients. I took all these other roles through the club because I was salaried. And so I would take these other roles through the club to make sure I could make myself valuable so they'd want to keep me. And then as my schedule filled with clients, I was able to sort of dial back some of those other pieces.
Incredible. Thinking about, you're growing this program, you grow the nutrition program, you scale back and you focus, and then you grow Eat Fit. Your life must have been very busy. I'm sure Brad's life was busy. And that creates a lifestyle where obviously you're eating out. So that made the Eat Fit part fun and personal. What else did that, did you find that lifestyle was cumbersome? And if so, like, how did you deal? I think about, a young married couple or a young couple in general.
You're just going the whole time.
And I did that with my husband, and you just sort of spiral out, focus on work. But sometimes we cope in weird ways and we don't realize we're doing it, and we don't realize that sometimes we're not helping ourselves. What are your thoughts?
So with that, I think there's a lot. We did a lot for years. It was, we, wake up early, exercise, like whatever it would be, work. So you're up at 4:30 or 5, you're doing your workout, whether it's outside run or going to the gym, which is also my office, and then working, and then so much socially that, let's meet this friend for dinner, let's do this here. And so you're just constantly going, and then you get home, it's 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and you've kind of accumulated all this stuff from the day, but you haven't had time to sort through it. And so it feels like it was a little bit of a spiral. And so part of it is, I think is just kind of our normal culture that is New Orleans, that restaurants, and that's how a lot of times we unwind, and that is our social time with friends. And so For us, for years, it was that. Probably 6 nights a week we ate out at restaurants.
Wow.
So Eat Fit was just like, Brad's like, you just want to be able to have things to order when you go to these places. But what it also meant was that, our food intake was like not always in our control. We weren't always preparing our own meals. I mean, we're very rarely preparing our own dinners. And alcohol. I mean, every night we would go out, or, it got to where you have a glass of wine. Oh, then you see someone you have a second, maybe a third. And so it was something that just that normal social drinking, but over time, you don't realize in a different way, but similar to that disordered eating time, you don't realize just how quickly that can escalate. And, that might be weeknights and then weekends or more. And so over time, I don't know that necessarily one was related that the social and drinking kind of as a means to unwind was related specifically to the escalation in work. I don't know if it would have just happened anyway, because that also is just sort of the social culture. But it happened. And so in late 2015, that was when, I was like starting to feel like in normal situations, I was starting to experience anxiety, and I don't typically experience a lot of anxiety. I can kind of separate those things or bring that down pretty well. And Brad's like, he started kind of looking at different things, and he was like, what if you tried not drinking? And I was like, well, what? Yeah, I mean, in theory, but there's always like a reason not to. So then again, Brad's idea, Eat Fit, Brad's idea turned into Alcohol Free for 40. He was like, what if there was a challenge? Because he also knew I would try this challenge to encourage people to give up alcohol for Lent, which a lot of people do, but make it their own self-test and do different lab markers and physical markers before and after. And I was like, I like that idea. So I pitched it to my editors, and then I'm like, let me put myself through it first just to see. So Maria, I did my test on a Monday after a normal weekend of drinking. My inflammatory markers were like over twice the normal limit.
Oh my.
My liver enzymes were all elevated. I mean, everything. And I was like, holy cow.
And you were a dietitian in a
Yes.
fitness center who exercised all the time, right? Okay.
So I asked my doctor, can you do it in 1 week? Because I thought 40 days is a really long time to go without alcohol. And this was the early December. And I thought holidays are coming. Like, let's just do it in 1 week and see what happens. So I was like, I know I think I can do a week without alcohol, but that even I wasn't sure, because again, the culture was so, and I remember the next day, that 1 week, there were so many occasions that I was having to it felt like sludge to change your behavior or your response. Oh, do you want a glass of whatever wine? Oh, I'll just take sparkling water. And it felt like those words were like pushing, every word was pushing out of my mouth. But that 1 week came and went. We had a party here at our house for Brad's firm. And I mean, everyone's, just drinking and enjoying. And I remember thinking, I don't even want to have one beer, because I want to see exactly what those numbers are in 7 days with 0 alcohol. So I was just focused. And I got those tests done and my doctor was like, you're not going to see any difference, Molly. 7 days isn't enough time. And we get the numbers back after that 1 week. And sure enough, all of those numbers that had been double, or in other cases, 50% above the upper limit, they were all at the low end of normal.
Wow.
Every single one of them. And I was like,
7 days.
In 7 days. That was all it took for me. And so and during that week, I had several different things that I had presentations and some of these things that anxiety had been feeling like it was escalating out of control. And I was able to, you would have the normal nervousness, but I was able to bring it back. And I thought, oh my gosh. And then, of course, Brad's researching. He goes, and now I know a lot more about this but at the time I didn't know that alcohol actually sensitizes our stress response. So basically something that should be like a level 3 stressor, our body perceives it as this level 10. And we go into this big high reaction to it. And alcohol does that. So when you're having alcohol daily, things that are just mild stressors, our body perceives it as giant stressors. I didn't know that. And I experienced the difference. And I was like, this is a game changer. So sort of in a different way, but similar to that experience that I had with the disordered eating, it was a slippery slope down. And then that view, that kind of looking at it from a very objective standpoint, I have these black and white numbers in front of me. I'm also seeing just how I felt in this past 7 days. There's no reason for me not to feel this way always. And this is how I want to continue. And it wasn't an easy choice, like, because it was December, but I remember thinking, okay, we're going to go out of town for a couple of weeks after Christmas. So let me look at each day and make these choices each day and all these different events leading up to Christmas that usually are centered on alcohol. And let me make this choice of how I'm handling each of those circumstances. And then after that, we're going to be gone for 2 weeks. And when we get back, a month will be down and it'll kind of start to be habit. And that's what happened. And so I feel really fortunate that that was something that was becoming something that it was starting to feel, I didn't feel like I was on top of it. I felt like it was starting to be that I didn't feel like I had that choice as much because it just was something that was just so ingrained. It felt like, but the reality is it wasn't.
Yeah, I think it is so insightful to see big change and big choice as a one day at a time. Oh, maybe it's one meal at a time. In your life, you probably were thinking 30 days in advance all the time, and yet, had to just check off your to-do list as you went. I think it's a great reminder to anyone who's listening that if you do want to make a big change in your life, you want to make a choice that feels really big and really heavy. Like, if Molly, I don't know if you'd believe yourself if you had a conversation with old Molly. They're like, by the way, you're not going to be
a drinker,
a big drinker who goes out and 6 days a week, gets 3 glasses of wine every night. That would have stopped you in your tracks and thought, well, how? Sometimes we get so worried about
or
that.
rebel against it.
Yes, we can get really concerned about, well, how am I ever going to do that? I can't. That negative self-talk comes in. And we forget that it's a choice every day to make, to put your life in that direction. And I think that gave you the ability to focus on other things in your life.
The replacement behaviors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So replacement behaviors. How did you get through that first week? Did you have these types of behaviors you knew you wanted to do already? Or was it, flying by the seat of your pants?
It was more flying by the seat of my pants because I know a lot more now about it from my own experience, and then also with Alcohol Free for 40. And I've talked about Alcohol Free for 40 in this podcast, and I'll link to some of that if you want to know more. But with what we're about to talk about, we've kind of turned into this whole campaign that we're doing that's been incredibly rewarding for the reasons I'm about to talk about. But I've learned so much now about the importance of replacement behaviors. I don't think it struck me how important it was, though, at the time. But of course, as a dietitian, we know when we're making any type of a change, we need to think, well, what are we going to be doing instead of this thing that has been bringing me pleasure or comfort or a stress release or whatever it is. So one of the things that was sort of a natural fit is, okay, well, if we're not going to be going out and drinking, what are we going to do? So that's when Brad and I started the Walk and Talk, which has morphed into our work walk and talks. And, I love like the good walk and talk with like any friend, family who will do it. I love it, virtual or in real life. That was huge as that transition time, because one of the things that we also see over and over and over with our people coming through our Alcohol Free for 40 initiative is that the witching hours is what I call it. It's those transition times, the windows of transition time. So from the go of the day, whether it's work or whatever you've got going on during your day, to that quieter time at night, that unwinding time, people, and myself included, we turn to alcohol. I'm going to have that cocktail, that glass of wine, and it's going to, I feel like I'm just kind of like revved from the day, and this will kind of help me dial it back. And we think that we need it, like we're air quoting, like need it. And so what are you going to do instead of that? And so Brad and I would take walks, and it immediately, I was like, wow. At the end of that, I felt that decompression. I felt the similar kind of effect, that I had felt maybe that I was like, you're shot out of a cannon for the day and you're going and doing all these things. But after that, I would feel like, and even more than usual, we may have talked through whatever had happened that day or really kind of processed that. But there's, of course, what happens with movement is our endorphins and all these chemicals and compounds that are happening in our body that are bringing us that calming sensation that is a natural. We're not having to reach outside of ourselves for it. So that was one that I can't remember if I had really discussed it and planned it in advance or if it just sort of happened. So I think the other thing is, how did I get through that week? I wasn't going into that week thinking I'm going to stop drinking or even anything beyond that. I just thought I want to go through 1 week and see what it feels like, see if I can do that whole 40 days and see what that feels like. And that was really all I was going into it with. But after that 1 week, when I saw the difference in all these markers and improvement, I thought, that's it. So for me, that was all I needed to decide that way that I had been living and those choices I had been making, it just wasn't what was for me. I don't see it as this is a way that everyone needs to be, or even that it's like a defining thing about me.
Yep.
You know,
I never knew this about you until we were in Alcohol Free for 40. The second year I was in
Really?
it, I had no idea. Nope.
yeah, it's really, in a similar way to the issues with eating and sort of how that spiraled. It's sort of, again, that just like very, just a quiet spiral that you don't see happening. And then you go, wait a second, and they were not the same, but they were similar. And I think for me, in hindsight, my response to both was similar. In the middle of it, you don't realize you're doing it though. In the middle, you don't realize you're making this decision or you're making this step that is going to change the trajectory of your life. I had no idea, but I'm glad that I did make those decisions.
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah. Let's take a minute to talk about Ana Luisa, one of our sponsors for this week's episode. I've been loving the look of layered necklaces, and Ana Luisa has so many versatile, timeless pieces. And what's really cool about Ana Luisa is that they design pieces that also have a beautiful story, starting with recycled materials whenever possible and small batches that are kind to the earth. The company is carbon neutral, offsetting 100% of carbon emissions. Their jewelry is crafted with care from the best noble metals, but it's still affordable with pieces starting at $39. Check it out. You can use my code FUELED for 10% off at shop.analuisa.com/fueled. That's shop.analuisa.com/fueled. So treat yourself, treat your loved ones to beautiful, sustainable jewelry at shop.analuisa.com/fueled. That's shop.analuisa.com/fueled using promo code FUELED for 10% off.
I mean, if we can go back and summarize a little bit, I mean, so much of what you've shared with us is talking about how you've been set up to handle these situations because of the choices you've made and also because of how you've been raised. I mean, riding your bike to church in your shorts,
Right.
So like being with your dad in church, like sweaty in your shorts and just like, hey, we're here, we made
In a
it.
very conservative church where everyone else is in suits and dresses, and like we come up with like it was a matching little short set. It was my Sunday short set.
Precious. But you were, the little Kimball girl with 17 cats and a dad and tattered curtains, and yet you were infused by his grittiness and his scrappiness, and you experienced a lot of hardship as you entered college, and navigating disordered eating is not something I'd wish on anyone, especially someone so young, so determined, so focused on doing things well. It's hard to kind of get lost in that. It's very cloudy in there, just like having so many thoughts about food and maybe not even realizing that you're having them, right? So being able to pull yourself out of that, and then years and years and years later, pulling yourself out of, wow, I'm in this weird cloudiness. I don't know why. You have Brad to point to a few ideas of how to get yourself out, and you did it. So many incredible choices. So many.
Both of those also led to let's help others do this.
Yes, yes.
Which I hadn't really put that thought together. That sort of like, wow, I went down into this, pulled out of it. Okay, how can we share?
Yeah, and that's allows you to be so empathetic, which some people won't be able to tell about a person when they see them and they think they have a perfect life.
Right.
Oh, well, they'll never understand my life. And they might not realize, hey, Molly Kimball, the person you see on TV delivering the information about nutrition you didn't know, she gets it. Like there's a humanness to all of us. And it's largely due to the fact that we all experience challenges. We all have to navigate our way through them. And sometimes the way we navigate is really telling of who we are. I'm curious, you've listed a couple different ways and told us some awesome stories. What else along your life has been maybe one of those standout memories or moments where you realized, wow, I really had to show up fully in my life to handle something?
I think the worst, hardest part, and this is when like I feel tears like in my feel tears in my throat as I'm but was it because it was the duration of it and it was the intensity of it for such a extended time was when my mom she had a tremendous huge surgery in 2012 and she had an aneurysm that extended so basically her aorta was dilated like 3 times expanded the size that it should be and it was 2 feet of this from her collarbone to her belly bone.
Oh my goodness.
And belly button.
Yeah.
And they found it because she had a urinary tract infection and she kept throwing up the medication. So they had to do an ultrasound and they were looking to see what's going on here with her UTI. And then they see, oh, wow, there's this giant enlarged aorta that extended basically her entire torso. So she had to go through a tremendous surgery. It was basically a huge procedure to replace 2 feet of your aorta with what's essentially like a stent of an aorta. And so she had this giant procedure at the end of 2012 and she was able to walk after. She was able to, weeks after because it was a tremendous, like the survival chances are low. The chances that you're going to be able to walk again are even lower. I mean, it's a very risky surgery, but it's also like, what's your alternatives? Because this aneurysm is going to burst. Like, I remember she got a bicycle after she was diagnosed. I was like, Mom, what are you doing?
What?
Like, first of all, she was not a coordinated person, like in her best of times. And I'm like, in your best days, like, we don't need you riding a bike probably. And like now, like this, if you fall, this is over,
Yeah, right.
And so she didn't. And so, so she ended up though getting this like crazy infection. It's called VRE and it's a resistant type of infection that actually when I was in my internship, there was no treatment for it. So if you had VRE, that was it. And I remember when they came in and said she had VRE, I panicked because I don't do clinicals.
Yep.
And so, but now there's medication. So the long story of it is the infection had gotten in around the grafted aorta and they weren't able to, you can't drain it, you can't get it out. So they gave systemic antibiotics to treat the infection that actually damaged the nerves throughout her body and damaged the nerves in her legs. She lost the full use of her legs from the waist down. And so, and then, she ended up every complication. She was intubated with the checking blood gases in her hands. She lost a finger. You name it, it happened. Then we had to do peg tube feeding and it was like and so she was in the ICU for 3 months. She was in the hospital for a full year and I'm her only child.
Right.
And so, and her husband, was a real caregiver. And so he lived with us during this time. And it was incredibly challenging because every single day there was a life or death challenge, truly. And it was just like, it was the hardest time to see for probably 6 months. Every day it was going down and down and down. And every day it felt like you were poking a new hole in her to keep her alive. She never got the use of her legs back.
Okay.
And she was a very, I feel like I'm very driven, very focused, kind of very task oriented, times 100. And that was her. She was just very that way. Like everything was like purpose driven and very, very like, efficient with her time and all this stuff. So now to have to be dependent on someone was, and that person was my stepdad. Usually it drove her crazy.
It must have.
Brad said it was like a science experiment, taking like the most hyper controlling person and putting them in a life now that everything is out of their control. And then just shy of 1 year, she got home. But of course that looked very different because now you've got someone who like can't move. Like it wasn't like she could kind of stand up, but then couldn't walk. I mean, she couldn't, everything had to be done with her. So, and there's the emotional things that go there and the anger that comes from her. And, it was, my role would be a lot of times to kind of get the big picture plan. And then my stepdad was really good at like implementing and putting that
Good.
plan into place. And so there wasn't a friction there. So that was good. But for that first probably year that she was back home, so she passed away after being home for about 3 years. So about maybe 3.5 or 4 years after, it was actually a little over 4 years after the surgery, she passed away. She was ready at that point. She just was never okay with where her life, I think some people can accept it. I mean, it's nothing that someone ever is going to just be embracing.
Sure.
But I think a lot of people may accept it or live their life in a way or find ways that they have other levels of autonomy or other things that can be. And she just couldn't get to that place. And so towards the end of her life, she started, she would say, if I'd have known what this was going to be like, I would not have taken the chance and done the surgery. And she started, and so when she did pass away, I mean, obviously it was heartbreaking, but the piece for me was that I knew that at that point she was ready. But during that time when she first moved back home, now you're like, wow, how do we acclimate her back into the house? My stepdad's, you have to make it, wheelchair accessible, all of these things. And so I would go up there weekly, and driving to Shreveport, it's about a 4.5, if you don't stop, 5-hour drive. And it was just killing me work-wise. I was like, it was just insane. So I don't think I've ever told you this. So what I did is I started taking the Greyhound bus.
What?
I took the Greyhound bus
No way.
to Shreveport every week.
So was that 4.5 hours or
It was
like 12?
7.5. But they have Wi-Fi on the bus and someone's driving you. So I was like, that was how I made it work. So basically I had like a
There's
whole...
that Kimball scrappiness.
So, but the Greyhound bus, no matter you could always find some lovely person to engage with who would be, someone that was just, you could hear their story or where they were going, or there was something there. But you can't trust that everyone on that bus is that way. So it's not like the airplane. If you have to go to the restroom in the airplane, you get up from your seat, you go to the restroom, and you go back to your seat. When you're on the Greyhound bus, you pack up all of your stuff. But it was something that I was like, I need to be here because you only are going to know what's happening when you're there. You have to be, and also just for emotional support to my stepdad, moral support, but also having my eyes on what's happening here. What help does he need? How much is he sleeping? What is everything like there? And there was just so much. It was really hard because there was the physical stuff that you're dealing with, but then there's the emotional stuff. And then there's the relationship between the two of them, and you're trying to navigate and manage all of this. And so that was by far one of the more trying times. There were so many times that she coded or whatever it might be that you would just be, I became a very public crier at times, during that. And then, but it's also, that was a time that I don't know that I've ever been the recipient of such intense level of compassion from people, and people who were her caregivers, her doctors. I mean, doctors who may be a fellow that had her for 1 month of a rotation. There was one doctor, his name is Jonathan Richards, and he continued to check in on her even after he left that rotation. And he became an advocate as she would transition to other places for her. And I'm like, this is just amazing. So there was so much love and just giving from the nurses, the doctors, that that made it all, it's that you don't realize just how much that can get you through.
And it wasn't even, when you tell the story about Dr. Richards, it wasn't even just for her. It was for you. Because when you had told me this, I thought it was so important that he was a doctor who knew how hard it was to be a caregiver, and how, having to catch up the next attending or the next doctor or the next person that came in, and to know that someone is thinking of you in that way it is a warm hug in a really hard time, because you basically had to compartmentalize your whole life, right? You were working on the bus, you are with, then you're thinking about your stepfather, and then you're coming back, and who knows what's going on in your head on your way home. It's always so hard to leave. So many things can happen in your head, and it just sounds like you had a lot of people who were there for you in that time.
It was and Brad was like absolutely incredible during that. And he was so giving and so, so generous with just like his emotions and his time. But it was, he said like after, and also a couple of things, like he said at first, he was like, okay, Molly's still doing everything with her normal job at Ashland Fitness Center. She's also writing for the newspaper every week and doing the TV segment. And he goes, I thought about saying, should we dial back from this a little bit? But then he goes, I realized that was an outlet because it was an area of focus. The other thing that was like a really good outlet, my mom, she was really just close with her church group in Shreveport. And I remember before she had her surgery, she sent me the list it was the prayer group list. And I kind of was like, okay, can you give everybody an update on my status after my surgery? And like, it was her Sunday school group. And I said, okay. And I'm thinking, I'm going to email your Sunday school group. I kind of thought, let me tell you, that Sunday school group became it was so cathartic to me because I would write and give them the update. And because I also knew, I mean, these people pray, you know, they pray. And so writing for them, like what the update would be or what the challenge would be, and sitting there in her hospital room and doing that, it was such an outlet for me, and knowing that it was being received with so much love on the back end. And so then once she was back in Shreveport, I started going with her to Sunday school and like got to know these people. Oh, I'm still on the prayer list. I receive the prayers and I read them all, because a lot of the names I recognize because it had been cards or other things through the years. Some of the names I don't, but I read them all because I know how important it was for me knowing that hers was read, you know?
Yeah.
And so those things, and, you know, but Brad would say, I could tell, he would say he would wake up and he would listen if I was in the other room to hear like if he could hear me crying or not, because every day there was such a devastating news, or many days. And so he'd be like, okay, what's our pulse today? So that was definitely the most trying time that I've been in to date. I'm sure there's going to be more, but one of the things that I think the way that I looked at that was, there were so many things that I felt like, wow, there's so much that happened, and in the way that they happened, it could not be chance only. There's no way that these things could all fall in line the way that they did. There's something bigger than us here that is kind of pulling all these things together. And so I looked for those things and I received those things. And I, with like her Sunday school group, I put this out there to them, and I like received their love and their support. And so I found ways that I could like, you know, it was like that level of like self-care in a way that a lot of it might be reporting out on her, but it was also, again, that cathartic outlet for myself. And so finding ways that I think that in all of that, there were still so many beautiful, beautiful moments that like are with me forever. People and moments and things that they did or said or touched that like, or like changed forever. And like, I really held on to those because it's what got me through each day. And so that's what I looked for each day, was these glimmers of like hope and positivity.
And that's what you had to look for in so many other challenges you faced in life. And the word that keeps coming to mind right now to me is acceptance. And it is very hard to lean in to the discomfort and the challenges of a situation if you're not accepting of the reality of them, or you're not accepting that you don't really know what's about to happen. And I just think how accepting you were for other people to help you. You're a really driven person, really motivated. I know there's not a thing in Eat Fit that you can't do, but you are so accepting of the idea of having a team. You're accepting of Brad offering ideas. He gives a lot of ideas. Like, you are an open-minded, accepting person. That changes your mindset, right? Like, that changes the messages you tell yourself when you are accepting of things versus, you know, being in denial or closing your mind off to things or doom and gloom, which, like, no one would fault you if you were doom and gloom about your mother dying. No one would. But that speaks to who you are. I think that's a pivotal truth about your personality and about your being. And that's why you're able to talk. So, you know, I know you have the tears in your throat, but, you know, that's crucial. And again, you might have been working out at 6 a.m. You might have been writing an article at 4:30 in the morning. And anybody could have said, wow, she really has her life together. She's one of those 5 a.m. people. No, you were managing. You were accepting of the challenge in front of you, and you had to put your head down and do what you needed to do.
When I looked back, I didn't wish that I had done things differently. I felt really good about what I had done through that point, you know? So, growing up, I talk about my dad was a primary parent because my mom had moved away when I was younger. And so, but it was probably good distance at that point because she also, as a younger mom, was kind of figuring out, or a younger person, was kind of figuring out where she was in life and what her priorities were. But the older she got, the better of a mom she became. And so it was at that time that when all this happened, you know, we had a good relationship through that. She just wasn't the hands-on parent. But regardless of that, something primal kicks in.
So much to balance, so much to hold. One, thank you for sharing that with us. And I know that there isn't a single person who heard it and thought, wow, like I know someone who's been through that, or I have been through that, or I'm going through that. And how we deal with these things is going to be different. It's allowed to be different, and balance looks so different for all of us.
I realized like everyone's definition of balance is different. And also everyone's work is different. And some people, after they leave work, they want nothing to do with it. They may not enjoy it that much. And so they want to put in their time at work. And then when they're out, peace out. You know, for me though, I love what my work is. And so I used to feel more pressure on myself because I was like, felt like I needed a better sense of balance. And then like I'm striving for this better sense of balance. And it's just like, felt like it wasn't happening. And then I'm like, wait a second. If I'm enjoying how I'm spending my life and I'm enjoying the things that I'm doing, why try to chase what some arbitrary sense of balance even is? So again, I think it matters of where you are in life, what your situation is with kids, with all this, because that balance, when also including my mom and all that, also looked very different. But for me, if I'm loving the things that I do, and throughout the day, the week, there's, you know, every single day I'm doing something out in the yard, out in the garden. When Maria got here, I'm like, oh my God, come look at these roses. I have to measure how tall they are, but they might be 9 feet tall. Like
they're really tall, y'all.
They're huge, and there's a lot of them. But I'll work in the yard. Brad's teaching me tennis, the walk and talks, going to the pottery studio every week. There's things that I'm doing always that are really layering in that self-care. And I also work a lot. And then I think the other kind of thing as we've been talking, that is sort of a common thing that I do is I'm always going to try to find what's funny in something. And there's just everyday things that happen. And I'm always sharing it with our team. Our Eat Fit North Shore dietitian, Brittany, is like, well, your life is there's these snapshots of TV shows from it. Who did these things happen to? But I'm like, I think they happen to a lot of us, but we don't always grab them and realize that these funny things are happening either to us or around us, or there's so many interesting people, or like I said, these beautiful moments that were with my mom, or just even if my mom, as horrific as things were, there were some really hilarious moments. And so I'll always try to find that. And then I want to tell everyone who will listen what my funny story is. And so I think that, and then positivity, I know we always say surround yourself with positive people, but I think we don't always follow through with that. But I try to, if someone elicits a feeling of maybe it's not negativity, but it's something that's just not quite good, whether it's on social media or usually in real life or whatever that might be, I'm not going to maybe not ever be around that person, but I'm not going to choose to spend more. So surrounding that with that positivity, and it's what we're putting into our souls from what we're reading, what we're listening to, the people that are in our lives, what are we filling our entire space with? But I think sometimes there can be let's surround ourselves with positive things, and then we forget that the negative's there, or we pretend the negative's there. So for me, I try to always, let's address this, let's feel this, let's do something when we can actively do. But when we don't need to just lay in it, let's try to pull ourselves out of it, because we can do more often when we're not in that space.
Yeah. There's a trend of, good vibes only, which is super in a way, like it's almost a toxic positivity.
Right.
And it feels like then you don't have space to be upset. You don't have
Right.
space to navigate those really hard times. I really like the way that you position it, which is, you make that time for yourself. You focus on what's good. You can acknowledge what's not. And maybe you laugh about it in a week. I don't think we've ever had a time together, working together, where we haven't laughed about something atrocious that happened 4 days earlier.
Right.
Or it's like a very chunky cat in your neighborhood and we are
Right.
just giggling about, how adorable it is.
Yeah.
So I think there is a beauty in that. And not everything can be made into a joke. Not everything can be made into a funny moment. But it is a choice to be able to look at life and say, there's good, there's not good, and I'm going to fill my life with those things that at least give me pride and give me joy. And you've done that for so many decades now, and you provide that example and that model to our entire team, just absolutely. And to New Orleans and to anyone who's listening, we all look up to you for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I look at if there's a negative, if there's an issue, like sometimes I might not even see it. Oh, well, this is a negative, but sometimes it's very clearly a negative. Other times it's a gap. Something's just not there. And so my thought is, what can we do about this? How can we close this gap? Or there's an issue here, like what's in our control that we can start doing now? And a lot of times that's my thoughts,
Yeah.
and like who can we connect with that can do these things? And so a lot of times things are completely out of our control, and like that's okay too. And we have to accept that. But the things that are, let's do everything we can and let's put everything that we can into it.
Yeah, you're all about making lemonade. I've heard and I'll be honest, y'all, sometimes the lemonade we make, it's still really tart. It's not quite a perfect recipe yet. There have been a lot of moments where we look at each other and we're like, this is such a lemon.
Yeah.
And instead of fighting it, arguing it, we've learned how to take pictures of it. We've learned how to, make a great lemonade. And it's what makes us a great team. That mentality that you have shared and lived is what allows us to be a great organization. It's what allows your house to feel like a safe, comfortable place to be, I'm sure, because that's the mentality you bring wherever you go.
Well, thank you. And Maria, thanks for walking through this Raw Truth episode with me. It's some of the things, like I said, I've talked about a lot before. Others, they're big, and maybe people know it, especially the stuff with my mom, but maybe I just haven't really shared or opened to it just because there wasn't like an opportunity or the right time. So, Phil's story made me realize, wow, there's a lot more that's behind a lot of times what we see. And again, I was a little nervous to share mine, but I'm glad that we did this. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure and truly an honor to be able to walk with you through this and sharing these stories and laughing alongside with you. It's been great.
Thank you so much. It means so much, and I really appreciate it. And to our listeners, thank you for coming along this journey as well and listening in. And I hope finding some element of inspiration in this episode of The Raw Truth as part of our Fueled Wellness and Nutrition podcast. I'm grateful to Maria for co-hosting with me and helping to guide this conversation and help make it a little bit easier. As always, you know that I love to hear from y'all. I love to hear what you think about this Raw Truth episode series that we are doing. I am registered dietitian Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. And if you would like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com, and you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And join us next week for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.